What if the treasure you are chasing is real, but the road to it is designed to change you before it rewards you? That is the quiet trick inside The Alchemist. Paulo Coelho writes a simple fable about a shepherd boy named Santiago, but the story keeps asking a serious question: when a desire will not leave your heart, is it a fantasy to escape from, or a calling you must learn how to follow? The novel begins with Santiago already living a life many people would call free. He is a shepherd in Andalusia. He travels with his sheep, sleeps under the open sky, reads, observes the weather, and knows the habits of his flock. But he is not fully at rest. A recurring dream tells him about treasure near the pyramids in Egypt. The dream feels strange, childish, and persistent. If it were only greed, he could dismiss it. If it were only imagination, it would fade. Instead, it keeps returning. This is the first movement of the book. A personal legend begins as an inner disturbance. Santiago meets a gypsy woman who tells him to follow the dream, and then he meets Melchizedek, the old king of Salem. The king gives the desire a name. A personal legend is the thing a person is meant to accomplish. But Coelho does not make destiny passive. The king asks Santiago to pay a real price. The boy must sell his sheep, leave the familiar life that protects him, and risk looking foolish for a promise no one else can verify. That is why the sheep matter. They are not just animals in the background. They represent the comfort of a life that is understandable. Santiago knows how to feed them, lead them, and predict them. They give him identity. But they also show the danger of living only by habit. The sheep are content as long as food and water appear. Santiago realizes a human being can also become that way, safe, fed, repetitive, and slowly separated from wonder. His first major test comes in Tangier. After selling his sheep and crossing into Africa, Santiago trusts a stranger and loses his money. The dream immediately becomes humiliating. He is alone, unable to speak the language, and suddenly poorer than before. This moment is important because the book refuses the fantasy that omens remove hardship. A calling can be real and still begin with loss. The question is whether the first wound becomes proof that the dream was stupid, or training for deeper attention. Santiago finds work with a crystal merchant, and this section is one of the book's clearest practical lessons. The merchant has his own dream of going to Mecca, but he has protected the dream by never attempting it. As long as the dream remains untouched, it can remain beautiful. Santiago, by contrast, brings movement into the shop. He suggests display changes, tea in crystal glasses, and new energy. The shop improves, but the merchant's sadness remains. He shows Santiago what happens when a person keeps a dream only as decoration. The crystal shop also teaches that progress is rarely mystical in appearance. Santiago does not receive treasure there. He works, observes customers, solves practical problems, learns patience, and rebuilds his resources. The book's spirituality is not laziness with poetic language. It repeatedly joins signs with effort. Omens may point, but Santiago still has to sweep floors, talk to people, save money, and decide again whether to continue. When Santiago joins the caravan across the desert, the story widens. He meets the Englishman, who studies alchemy through books and symbols. The Englishman wants the master formula. Santiago learns more by watching the desert, the camels, the silence, and the caravan's discipline. Coelho is not mocking books, the novel itself is a book full of teachings. But it is warning that knowledge can become incomplete when it never touches the world. The Englishman has theory without surrender. Santiago has openness without method. Both need to learn. The desert becomes a teacher because it strips life down to attention. Every sound, cloud, bird, and change in wind can matter. Here the language of omens becomes less like superstition and more like disciplined awareness. Santiago learns that the world speaks, but not always in words. This is one of the book's central claims: when the heart is awake and the person is willing to act, ordinary reality becomes full of guidance. The risk is that readers may turn this into magical shortcut thinking. The story itself resists that by making Santiago pay attention, make choices, and accept consequences. At the oasis, Santiago meets Fatima. This is the emotional test of the personal legend. Love could become an excuse to stop, and ambition could become an excuse to abandon love carelessly. Fatima's role is not to trap him or to erase herself. She understands the desert's logic: love should not prevent a person from becoming what they are called to become. The book's ideal of love is demanding. It says real love does not shrink the soul. It gives the beloved courage to continue. The tribal war and Santiago's vision of danger add another turn. He sees a warning in the flight of hawks and tells the oasis chiefs. If he is wrong, he may die. If he is silent, others may die. This is where omens stop being private inspiration and become responsibility. Santiago's gift must serve more than his own treasure. A dream that matures becomes ethical. It asks what the seeker can perceive, protect, and risk for others. Then the alchemist enters as a guide who does not let Santiago hide inside half-understood wisdom. He teaches through pressure. He pushes Santiago away from comfort, away from fear, and toward direct contact with the soul of the world. The famous episode of turning himself into the wind can sound impossible if read only literally. As fable, it dramatizes the book's deepest spiritual idea: the individual heart, nature, love, and God are not separate machines. Santiago survives by listening so completely that he understands his place inside a larger unity. But the alchemist also keeps the lesson grounded. He tells Santiago not to confuse love with possession, not to confuse signs with certainty, and not to stop near the end because the journey has become frightening. Near the pyramids, Santiago is beaten by men who think he is treasure. One of them mentions his own dream of treasure buried in a ruined church in Spain, the very place where Santiago's journey began. This reversal is the novel's final joke and final wisdom. The treasure was physically near home, but Santiago could not have received it as the same person who first slept in the church. He had to cross the sea, lose money, work in the crystal shop, cross the desert, love Fatima, face war, meet the alchemist, and stand at the pyramids before he could understand the clue. The book is not saying travel is pointless because treasure is at home. It is saying the outer quest trains the inner person to recognize what was hidden in plain sight. The practical takeaway is not to chase every impulse and call it destiny. The novel asks for a more serious test. Does the desire keep returning with depth? Are you willing to pay a clean price for it? Can you learn from setbacks without turning them into identity? Can you work patiently when the path looks ordinary? Can you love without using love as a cage? Can you read signs without abandoning judgment? The personal legend is not a permission slip for recklessness. It is a demand for participation. The Alchemist endures because its story is simple enough to remember and layered enough to argue with. Its optimism can feel too smooth if someone wants a realistic map of suffering, money, politics, or trauma. The book is not that kind of map. It is a fable about vocation, attention, courage, and trust. Its final meaning is that treasure is not only the gold Santiago finds. The treasure is the person formed by the search, someone who can hear his heart, respect the world, recognize love, survive failure, and return home with eyes that are finally awake.